So I just wanted to share with you where I come from and what we're doing. And that's, we're not filmmakers really, but we just want to tell the story, and that's really the easiest ways to tell it. So we did that in September. I had this dream about riding these pipelines, and I have horses. I rode my whole life pretty much, but I don't really do big things like that usually. And I just kept dreaming that, about riding against the current of the oil that was supposed to come. That's the way I dreamed it. And so first I went out to South Dakota and I was like, hello, Lakota people. I had this dream that we should ride this proposed route, this pipeline, and y'all ride a lot. And they all looked at me and nodded their heads. Went like that for a little while. And then they said, we're going to talk about it and we'll go to some ceremonies. And then, so they did. In the meantime, I come home and then I said, well, I guess I'm supposed to ride my own pipeline. You know, it's kind of like that burden of dreams. You understand what I'm saying? You could tell the people you're dreaming, can you please ride this pipeline? And they all nod. And so then they call me up and I said, well, we're going to ride this one Alberta Clipper line, which is a tar sands pipeline, I said. And then they said, well, we're going to ride out there too. So then we end up riding twice. And then right then they announced that Sandpiper line, which is that Bakken fracked oil line. And I said, well, we'll ride that one too. And so my community wanted to do that. So that's what we did. You can find that on YouTube, if you want to share it with your people. But part of the reason it's important to share that with you is that all that stuff is coming this way. It has to go through us to get to you, right? And so that's part of this whole, how we are connected. And I just had some hearings. League of Women Voters sponsored the first meeting, which was the Public Utilities Commission, the DNR, Enbridge, and myself, talking about these issues in one of these small towns. And if any of you are interested, want to help landowners or just inform them of your experience out there, you should contact us at our website or something, because I think that people would like to hear from other people. So that's one of the reasons I was interested to come here, was to say, you see our ecosystem, we don't have PCBs. It's a beautiful ecosystem and we like to keep it that way, and we don't want the pipeline. And in the case, just one more thing before I get into the formal remarks of this pipeline is the Bakken oil. There's 2.63 billion barrels in the Bakken. 2.63 billion barrels in the Bakken. And every year we consume 6.8 billion barrels as a country. So there's less than half a year's oil in that pipeline, and it's highly explosive. And so that is why we say it is really about greed. It is not about need. And, if any of you have been watching it, it's a very, very big, challenge out there. So again, thank you for having me here. Now what did I do? Oh, it's always a little bit nerve-wracking up there. So I'm going to talk to you kind of about two worldviews and where we are going. In our teachings as Anishinaabe people, we are told of a prophecy. A long time ago, these prophets came to us and they talked about what was going to happen to us as people. And they talked about the times ahead. That's what prophets do. They talked about, how, what was going to happen to us. And, we messed some things up ourselves. Like early on in our discussion, in our communities, I say that no society has a monopoly on botching things up. That's what we do. We're human. The question is if you have the humility and the commitment to fix it. So I think it's really important to realize that that's part of what we do as human beings. But they talked about how some people would come and some would be good and some would not be so good, and that's true. Some people came to this country were just great people, and some of them were just absolutely rotten. They talked about how a lot of our people would disappear, and we didn't have a word for smallpox. But that's what they were talking about, just devastated our communities. They talked about how a lot of our things would disappear, and I'm pretty sure we didn't have a word for anthropologists, but that's probably what they're talking about. Haul off complete villages and stick them over at the Peabody Museum or the Smithsonian. Just in your ancestors and everything. They talked about how a lot of our people would go to sleep, and I think they were talking about the boarding school or the residential school era. Where a lot of our people were forced into these schools, so they could be reprogrammed and really heavily abused physically and sexually, and emotionally and spiritually. And then they talked about how these new people would be born. They called them the Ashki Anishinaabe, the Ashki Anishinaabe. And they said that the Ashki Anishinaabe would be these people, and they would remember who they were. They would begin to remember who they were. They would remember their songs. They would remember their teachings. They would go and find their things, and you know, so those people, they say that those people, the Ashke Anishinaabe, that they would then be posed with two choices, two mikana. And one path or one road, they said, was well-worn, but it was scorched. Well-worn but scorched. And the other road was not well-worn, and it was green. And it was our choice upon which path to embark. And that's what our prophets told us a really long time ago. And you know, what I figured, you know, what I believe is that that's not just for us as Anishinaabe, but that's really where we are as a country. Really where we are as a society. We're a society which has a choice between two paths. One is pretty well worn and is pretty scorched, from what I can see. And one is not well worn and it is green. And it's really a choice which way we're going to go. But I think that a lot of you know, and I'm going to talk about it in this, is that, you know, we're these people that have, we have agency, or we have knowledge, we have technology, and we have the opportunity to do the right thing. The question is how we make those transitions in our society. And that is not easy, you know, because there's a lot of forces that are out there. But, you know, we have to remember that, you know, not only do our descendants count on us to do that, but all our relatives count on us to do the right thing too, whether they have wings or feet or roots or paws. Because we're the only shot they all got, you know. And so, you know, I'm in this room and a lot of you are young students, and we have to, you know, think of what our responsibilities are. So this is painting. I actually own this painting, although I'm going to give it to my office so that I can put my mother's painting up, because that's the right thing to do, right? But this is an old guy from my community. His name is Nagani Banase, and he's a leading bird, and he looks out his window and that's what he sees. And to me that reflects, you know, where we are, you know, and our opportunity. This is a picture. I always like to show this picture. It's Anishinaabe art. I don't know how many of you have seen this kind of art before. Can you raise your hand? That's not too bad, you know. Okay, so maybe about 30%, 40%. So this is, this art emerged from our, we see it in our Medewin scrolls as Anishinaabe people, and our pictographs, our birch bark scrolls, and it is drawing, originally, you know, you see it in the pictographs in the boundary waters, he's drawing some of them. And it shows some of our teachings as Anishinaabe people, this teaching of Indinawe Maganatuk, that we're all related. There's these spirit lines that connect these beings. And you can also see inside these beings. We have this teaching that most of the world is animate, because even the noun for stone is an animate noun in our language, asin, animate noun. And so I'm saying that because it reflects a lot of our teachings as Anishinaabe people, and people's art reflects their culture. And I always like talking about this because I was an undergraduate at Harvard, and if you wanted to study the art from Europe, you went to the Fine Arts department. If you wanted to study the art from Native America, you went to anthropology. And that is generally what an education will give you in this country. It's very Eurocentric. It's very, you know, caught in one box. And really my suggestion and my thinking is that the box is not going to work out in the long haul. You might want to figure out how to get out of the box, because it's not going to help us out. So, and have the courage to do that. And I always like to use the example that this month in our language is Manadu Giza Soons, or Gichu Manadu Gizis, the Great Spirit Moon, and then the one that follows that is called the Mavina Gizis, which is the Sucker Moon. Then Onabana Gizis, that moon's called the Hard-Crusted Snow Moon, that's around March. Then we have Iskigami Ziki Gizis, that's Maple Serpent Moon, comes around April, right? Then Wabagana Gizis, that's your Flower Moon. Then you have Odamina Gizis, a Strawberry Moon. Mean Gizis, Blueberry Moon. Monomina Gizis, a Wild Rice Making Moon. That's around in August. Then we have a moon called Watibaga Gizis, when the leaves change colors. Banakwe O Gizis, that's a moon in October. The leaves fall. Gashkadno Gizis, that means when it freezes over in that moon. And then Manadu Gizasoon's Little Spirit Moon. So, you know, I thought that you might like to hear our language. It's a language that's from this land. But I also thought you might notice a couple things. All of those moons is from here. Right? That is almost your entire ecosystem that I just told you, yeah? How that works. And did you notice that none of those moons is named after a Roman emperor? Look at that. You can have an entire worldview that has nothing to do with empire. You don't even need counseling. It's okay. Let go. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to bum you out for about 15 minutes. I'll try to go through quickly because you look like a smart bunch about what your problem is. And then we're going to go to the solutions, okay? This is your problem. You got plenty of them here. This is an ancient way to generate electricity, very highly inefficient and very polluting. We need to move past dinosaurs. Carbon needs to remain in the ground and not in the air. It's like a really, really simple concept. This idea of carbon sequestration is like waiting for the carbon sequestration ferry. That carbon sequestration ferry lives with the nuclear waste ferry. These ferries do not exist. You have to leave it in the ground and you can't put it in the air because you can't get it out of the air after you get it. So this is the Four Corners power plant of the Navajo Reservation. It could be anywhere. You know, I'm sure you have a couple in Michigan that look something like that. We aren't making too many more of them, but we still got this problem. You know, CO2. This is what happens to your temperatures. And unless you've been watching too much Fox News, you know this is true. This is what happens to your ice when your temperature increases. This is the Greenland ice mass. Their country is going to look entirely different. I believe it's already starting to look different, right? This is what happens to your CO2 concentrations. Atmospheric CO2 is shooting way up. And that is us. We're busy combusting ourselves into oblivion. That's where we're at. You know, and the implications are something that, you know, I have worked on these issues for many years, and about 7 years ago I went to my tribal government and I said, you know, we need to address CO2, we need to address climate change. And I remember the look on a couple of my tribal officials' faces, which was pretty much, that's not going to happen while I'm in office, right? And that's the thing about climate change, is they're like, you know, it's not a disaster I'm seeing right now, so it's not going to, you know, it's like this election thing. Someone needs to be responsible a little bit more intergenerationally and over a little bit longer time than a 2-year election cycle or a 4-year election cycle. This is what's happening to the ice. 2012, you could, you know, get up there to the North Pole and, geez, I saw that, you know, well, as a matter of fact, Minnesota was colder than the North Pole here last week or 2 weeks ago, right? This is what climate change looks like in the United States. This is in the United States. This is an Alaskan native village called Kivalina. It is falling into the ocean. It's falling into the ocean because the permafrost is melting and because there are more violent tides and more violent storms. And this village is, a few years ago they were projecting it would cost $40 million to relocate all of these people. And now the cost of their planning is $400 million. We don't have a plan for this. They're saying that we're going to be spending 20% of world GDP on climate change related disasters by 2020. That's 6 years from now. Nobody has that in their budget. Nobody has a plan. That's why you need to come up with some kind of way to reduce the potential impact and come up with some kind of plan, right? So, you know, all you young students, I'm, you know, sorry to bum you out. I'm sure you know some of these things, though. So, this is what happens when you increase the CO2 in your ocean. Atmospheric CO2 increases the acidity of your ocean, right? So, all of us who've been happily eating that seafood that we're importing from around the world or anywhere, get a huge increase in CO2, and this is your ocean on acid. This is what food insecurity looks like. Whether you are an island community or whether you are a country that relies a lot on fish or anything from the ocean. This is what climate change looked like with Hurricane Sandy. I believe they're called extreme weather incidents. I think that Homeland Security is not allowed to call them climate change disasters. It's extreme weather incidents. This is an extreme weather incident. Now, I didn't get pictures of Boulder, but you know what I want to say is that climate change doesn't strike according to income or race. It's indiscriminate. You know, it depends on where you live and, you know, those kinds of things. But mitigation or fixing up your situation afterwards is income-based. So my thinking is that the people that live here that were affected by Hurricane Sandy are going to have a lot easier time than people like in the Philippines, right? 225-mile-an-hour winds. Or people on the Navajo reservation who had flooding, right? And so that is a really important equity issue that we need to look at. I mean, ideally we avert disaster. But when disaster strikes, people need to have, an ability to have some dignity back. And these are called the death maps. That's what we used to call them. I don't know how you guys are doing in this one, but this is climate change related morbidity. And a lot of this is related to housing. So the reason, most of you, I don't have one of those fancy pointers, but if you look at the Dakotas, what you see on there that is black is the Cheyenne River Reservation and the Standing Rock Reservation, right? And the reason that they're on there, and some of these other territories are on there, in Wyoming, I believe that's Wind River, Fort Peck is in Montana. The reason is that, well, first of all, in the northern plains, and particularly in those poor counties, a third of the people live in a trailer. So what do you not want to be in a sear wind? What do you not want to be in when you have a whole bunch of snow dumped on you? There's no 911 service. There's no backup heating system, and there's, that is why those look like that, And so it's just really important to recognize the significance of it, and then the implications of that for food security are huge. The second thing I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to go through some of the bummer things, and then we're going to get a little happier, okay? This is the second thing I want to talk about, which is peak oil. And the reason that it's really important to talk about is that we are a highly fossil fuels intensive economy. We made some bad decisions. We still make bad decisions. We may continue to make bad decisions. Now I am 54 years old, and I was really busy combusting my whole life. I'm really sorry to say to those of you who are younger that I consumed half the world's known oil supplies before you guys could drive. I was right there, And so the fact is that we are in a situation where we keep combusting, and the United States is we consume more per capita than anybody in the world in terms of energy, anybody in the world except for Canada. And I can't figure out how you could consume more than an American except for be colder, right? And that's the only reason that they can do it, because how could you consume more than an American? That's baffling to me. But having said that, that means that we feel entitled. That's the reality. We feel entitled to have energy. So we're the kind of people that, we all got stuff to plug in. I'm like totally hooked up here, right? And you feel like if there is not power in that outlet, which is the problem with us, is that when you're an addict, like we are, you do a lot of bad things and you hang out with dealers. And that's where your American public policy went to. We became people who just are like, let me know the Christ I live. And so we spend more and more money on it. And now we are at this place where because access to fossil fuels is not as easy, we've entered an era which is known as extreme energy. It's also just generally extreme extraction. What does extreme energy look like? Extreme energy is when you blow off the top of 500 mountains in Appalachia. That's extreme. Mountaintop removal is extreme, right? And we didn't just blow those off so that we could have some coal-fired power plants in Pennsylvania. We blew those off so that we could ship that coal to India. That's extreme, right? Extreme energy is when you do things like drill 20,000 feet down in the ocean, like Deepwater Horizon, knowing very little about the consequences, but just thinking, well, I got this, right? And then it turns out you don't got this. And that's where the oil is now in the ocean, in places that we shouldn't be, that other beings exist who are not us, right? This is extreme energy, the tar sands. You guys saw the video. you know what it is. And I think a lot of you knew something about this before. You know, I went up there, I went to Mordor this summer just to see it with my own eyes, and that's what it looks like. You know, they have these holding ponds that are so toxic that they have these air cannons that go off like every 5 seconds so that no migratory birds will land on them, because if they land, they will basically disintegrate. And that's what that ecosystem looks like, right? That's extreme extraction, right? And this is your problem. This is fracking. This is natural gas deposits that exist. And that is a very extreme form of energy. 623 chemicals, no accounting, exempted under federal law from reporting by the Halliburton Amendment, right? This is something we don't know the consequences of, except for that, as in North Dakota, your water catches on fire. This is also what extreme looks like. This is New Brunswick this summer. This is a Mi'kmaq Indian guy, his name is Seven. This is SWN security force to protect the fracking company that has come into the middle of Mi'kmaq territory against their will. A lot of those Indians that were fighting with the cops and that woman facing all those cops are Mi'kmaqs. They had the full-on RCMP and they had the Canadian military and they had people that looked like that in fields from the air. Because fracking is so highly destructive and so extractive, those wells last a very short period of time, so they have to keep drilling to keep up their level of production. This is what the Bakken is going to look like. That's what Texas looks like now, and that's what they would propose for Michigan. You already saw this picture. This is Bakken oil in a train car that explodes. Fracked oil coming out of the Bakken. I don't know what other fracked oil looks like, but fracked oil out of the Bakken, it turns out, is very volatile. It was a very interesting discussion because when this occurred, these train cars are going through a town near me. They're going behind my office. And I was like, what the hell is in those that makes them explode like that? Because the Canadian military and the Canadian firemen had no idea why it exploded like that. It turns out that like gasoline is at like 52 in its volatility rating. Bakken oil is 32. Tar sands oil or dilbit is about 17 or 16. So it's like much more flammable than what's presently in the line. And that is what made us even more concerned.